The ideas that gave birth to our nation are the ideas that our nation is resistant to right now, and we should talk about that all the time.
In a world where narratives are shaped by corporations and gatekeepers, independent voices matter more than ever. Badlands Media brings together citizen journalists, researchers, and independent thinkers.
The truth is triggering.
Question the narrative. Explore the facts.
It's authenticity, courage, resilience.
Search for the truth others won't.
It's not about being first or being right.
The information war is changing.
It's about being authentic.
Embrace the friction.
Embrace the friction.
Shut the f*** up.
Authentically antagonizing. Join the movement.
I'm going to say how I feel.
Follow Badlands Media.
This is about the future.
The Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Geopolitics and the Ghost. I am your host, Gordon McCormick. The Ghost, the base Patrick Henry. This is Badlands Media, May 5th, 2026. What's going on with this? All right. So let's jump into it. We got plenty to cover today. Didn't get to everything this morning. I don't know why. There we go. Trying to get the camera looking right. Okay, so this morning we didn't get on the Badlands Daily to all the topics, really the big topic of the Middle East. Plenty to cover there. And rather than rehash what we went through on daily, maybe we'll just start with the Middle East. Okay, so pull this up. Okay, so OPEC makes first output decision after UAE exit from Reuters. Seven OPEC plus countries have agreed to raise oil output targets by about 188,000 barrels per day in June, Reuters reported on Saturday, citing two sources familiar with the group's plans. The report comes as the U.S.-Israel war with Iran continues to disrupt Gulf oil supplies and follows days after the United Arab Emirates quit the cartel. The UAE, one of the world's largest exporters, withdrew from OPEC and the wider OPEC Plus on May 1st. According to Abu Dhabi, the decision is driven by national interests and forms part of a long-term strategy, a sovereign strategic choice aimed at giving it greater flexibility over oil output. The country's share in the organization stood at about 13.5%. OPEC currently includes Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Algeria, Libya, Nigeria, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Republic of the Congo, and Venezuela. It coordinates oil production policies in an effort to stabilize supply in global energy markets. The wider OPEC Plus format also includes a group of allied oil-producing countries, most notably Russia, as well as Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Mexico, Malaysia, Oman, Bahrain, Brunei, Sudan, South Sudan, and Brazil. One source told Reuters that the decision to raise output signals that OPEC Plus continues to take a business-as-usual approach despite Abu Dhabi's decision, adding that the move will be similar to last month's hike of 206,000 barrels per day minus the share of the UAE. The rise in output is largely symbolic at this stage, Reuters noted, as shipping through the Strait of Hormuz remains severely disrupted by the Iran conflict. The U.S.-Israel bombing campaign on the Islamic Republic and the subsequent closure of the waterway that commonly handles about 1/5 of the global energy trade have sharply reduced exports from key OPEC plus members. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE, which were previously the only countries in the group capable of increasing oil output. In March, total oil production across all members averaged 35.06 million barrels per day, down by 7.7 million barrels per day from February levels, according to OPEC. Commenting on the Emiratis' exit, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Moscow respects the country's sovereign decision. Peskov stressed that Russia has no intention of leaving the group and dismissed suggestions that the UAE's move could spell the end of OPEC+. And that leads into this other story from the weekend, which is Kuwait exported 0 barrels of oil for the first time in 35 years last month. Kuwait exported 0 barrels of crude oil last month, according to data from a shipping monitor, marking the first such halt since the 1991 Gulf War. A major U.S. ally hosting around 13,500 American troops and serving as a key regional logistics hub, Kuwait previously produced about 2.7 million barrels per day and exported roughly 1.5 million barrels per day, with most shipments going to Asian markets, including China, India, and South Korea. On April 17th, Kuwait Petroleum Company declared force majeure, suspending exports after traffic through the Strait of Hormuz was effectively halted amid the ongoing U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. Oil accounts for roughly 50% of Kuwait's total GDP. Petroleum exports generate about 90% of the government's budget. As of early May 2026, Kuwait's oil output has fallen to around 1.2 million barrels per day, CNBC reports. Data from tanker trackers showed that while Kuwait continued producing crude, it did not export any in April, the first such halt since the 1990-1991 Gulf War. During that conflict, Iraqi forces under Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, prompting a U.S.-led coalition to launch a military campaign that forced their withdrawal in early 1991. Oil prices have surged since the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran in late February, prompting the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and we know the rest of that story. And again, it just feeds into another story that RT has them all lined up for me. Oil prices now determined by Trump's mood. This is from Friday. According to Robert Fizzo, crude prices have hit their highest level since 2022, following reports that the U.S. president would be briefed on new Iran options. Global crude oil rise and fall depending on whether U.S. President Donald Trump got enough sleep, Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico has said in a sarcastic remark. His comment came after oil rose to a 4-year high amid reports that the U.S. military would brief Trump on options related to the Iran conflict. On Friday, Brent jumped nearly 7% to over $126 per barrel before easing to $108 later in the session. The rally followed an Axios report that U.S. Central Command had prepared options for a short and powerful strikes on Iran aimed at breaking stalled negotiations. Quote, everything is under pressure, including oil prices, depending on how President Trump wakes up, Fico said on Friday, speaking with journalists and Bratislava. If he wakes up in a good mood, oil goes down. If he wakes up in a bad mood and makes some statement, oil automatically goes up. Prices saw extreme volatility and a sharp surge after the U.S. and Israel launched a bombing campaign on Iran on February 28th. So, yeah, he's right. Trump has talked about this so many times before he was president and during his presidency, and I think even during the Biden administration, about how the words of the president can impact markets. He used to criticize Obama for this all the time, that Obama would put out information at the worst possible time in order and markets would get devastated and crash. And if you haven't noticed, the Trump administration always seems to put out negative news, so to speak, news that is going to impact, or I should say news that's going to negatively impact markets, they always put it out on a Friday afternoon when markets are closed, right? That's probably by design. So by the time Monday morning rolls around, the knee-jerk reaction is not there, and you don't have, prices crashing. And Fitzo's just speaking to that. Fitzo's speaking that Trump can get up and tweet something, and prices will go up. He can tweet it again, and prices will come back down. And it just kind of goes to speak to the speculative nature of not just the stock market, but just the commodities markets in general and the way that they're traded. I mean, look at poly market, right? You can gamble on pretty much anything. And we saw that that U.S. soldier get arrested for winning. I think he won, what was it, $400,000 for betting that Maduro was going to be arrested or extracted, like right before the operation went live. And I guess he was involved in the operation. So yeah, I mean, we live in a speculative economy where far fewer goods are produced, and really a lot of money and wealth is generated just on in the financial markets, people betting on stuff, right? And so that takes us to Kirill Dmitriev's post. And so Kirill Dmitriev, of course, the economic envoy from Russia to the United States, his post says Icarus, and there's a GIF here of an angel, I guess, Icarus being burned by the sun. And it says, Justin, the stock market reaches most expensive valuation in history after the Warren Buffett indicator hits 227%, surpassing the dot-com bubble and the global financial crisis. And then he follows it up with a GIF of that movie, The Big Short, right? Bluth, isn't that the guy's name? Is it Michael Bluth, who's played by Christian Bale here? And so let's just look at Kirill Dmitriev's post his post history, because he's been posting some stuff lately. The one specifically that I wanted to see was when he said, as predicted. He's been posting up a storm lately. So yeah, here's him posting about the Spirit Airlines collapse. Spirit Airlines collapsed, the first airline victim of the historic energy crisis, as jet fuel prices jumped from $2.50 to $4 per gallon, 17,000 laid off. And he's quote posting from May 2nd, the world is sleepwalking into the biggest energy crisis in history, and only now some smart people are beginning to notice. Okay, so let's watch this video, because I did watch this video on Friday night. It's interesting. Let's just listen to what this says.
Though we're experiencing the biggest energy crisis in history, yet most of the world still doesn't know what's coming. I won't be around to cover it. So for my final TV interview, we're joined by BNN regular Eric Nuttall, partner and senior portfolio manager at 9 Point Partners. Great to see you.
Great to be here.
Let's just get that out of the way then. This massive disruption, a lot of observers saying that we haven't really felt the full bite of the oil shortage yet.
No, we have not. And it's to set the stage. This is by far the biggest energy crisis that anybody alive is experiencing. There remains a lot of apathy in the market, because I just don't think people can wrap their heads around it. It's natural when something is so humongous, the human mind just can't grasp it.
Yeah.
Middle Eastern production is down 14 million barrels per day. We've already lost about 650 million barrels, or forfeited production already. Even if the Strait of Hormuz were to open up tomorrow, which doesn't seem very likely, we'll lose 1.5 billion barrels of forfeited production. And so what that means is we've got inventories. The reason why all of this complacency is we had the safety buffer of the last of the ships that left the Strait before the closure. They've now reached berth. They've unloaded. So now there's no more safety buffer. And in a world where you've lost 14 million barrels per day, You either have to draw down inventories, which is happening, and even in the United States, we saw their diesel stocks fell 4% in a single week. Gasoline, we're not even in the driving season. Gasoline stocks fell 3% in a single week. We think the global oil inventories are going to reach record lows, like all-time lows in history, by the end of May. And that's even if the Strait were to open up today. So we really, really need a resumption in this. And I just don't think the market can grasp just how severe this is and what it means for the oil price.
Presumably, President Trump's people are saying, you know, this is going to get ugly unless you reach a deal with Tehran.
Very much so. So to lay it out, we think that the oil price in the coming days or weeks, we're not talking months or quarters, in the next couple of weeks, you will have to rationalize demand by more than during COVID. And the only way to achieve that, we're seeing some government interventions, like in Singapore, South Korea, they're mandating work from office because they're work from home, sorry, because they're afraid of product shortages.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be price. And so we see an inevitable, meaningful price spike coming in the coming days or weeks in excess of $150 to take down demand, because we simply can't deplete inventories at a constant rate.
Sorry, Eric, what price did you say there?
We think well in excess of $150 per barrel.
Even the futures market, or certainly the physical market?
Physical is already there.
Okay,
depending on which physical you want to look at. But we think that as you continue to suck oil and products out of the United States,
yes,
the arb between WTI and Brent and other benchmarks is going to narrow quite considerably. So, and it's wild to see.
For quite a while, Eric, you were more keen on natural gas, but you switched, you say, before the war began in February. You emphasized oil more?
Yeah, we did. So we switched pretty much 100% oil in around January.
Why was that? Why did you make that move?
So recall, coming into this year, we were supposed to have the most anticipated oil supply glut in history.
Yes.
We were monitoring that very, very closely, and we just didn't see it translating. Like, we follow global oil inventories very, very closely.
Yeah.
And so there were spreadsheet barrels, and then there was reality. So we thought that the market was overly pessimistic. Today, we're 100% oil weighted. Wow. In fact, we only have 11 names. So I think it's very, very obvious today what you want to own. Not for the oil spike, but in terms of what the day after looks like. But what does the energy market look like once the Strait of Hormuz opens up? In that world, we see roughly an $80 floor. We think demand is going to be boosted by about 40%, just as we have to replenish depleted stocks, depleted SPRs. And also, we think it's likely that we're going to lose productive capacity, especially in Iraq. Because you've got thousands, you've got 10,000 wells in the Middle East that you've got to bring back on. Many of these are old from very mature fields. So that's the market hasn't even gone there yet either.
So your fund is up, as of March 31st, was up almost 40%. So pretty good year.
Yeah, we're up 44% so far.
Right. And what are your big holdings among the Canadian energy stocks, Eric?
So we would have, again, we only have 11. There'd be 4 US and then 7 Canadian. We do own Suncor and Cenovus, both of which we think, so we're using $80 oil for our frame of reference. So both names are trading at 6 times cash flow, about 12% free cash flow yields on forward basis. We own Strathcona, a name that they're growing their production by 45% over the next 4 years, while also generating.
Okay, yeah, they're just getting technical now, talking about specific indexes and stocks. Yeah, so there's conversation happening in the marketplace, but there's also just a lot of it's like some of the market is panicking and some of the market seems almost like oblivious that of what's coming. People are talking about the huge spike in $150 a barrel is coming any day now. The post that Kirill Dmitriev is quoting here. This is again from Friday. He says the world is sleepwalking into the biggest energy crisis in history, and only now some smart people are beginning to notice. Kirill Dmitriev, of course, has a history, a career in finance. He's kind of like the Russian counterpart to Scott Bessent. So it's, listening to him when he points out this stuff is worthwhile. And so the post that included this video, let's just read through that real quick. Biggest energy crisis in history, $150 oil in weeks as inventories plunge to record lows. We don't need to recap everything that was discussed there, but because they did cite a lot of that. But Middle Eastern production down 14 million barrels per day. They had already lost 650 million barrels of production. The inevitable price spike, demand must be rationed, even though more severely than during COVID, and price is the only way to do it. Expect oil price well in excess of $150 per barrel in the coming days or weeks. The physical markets are already trading at these brutal levels. It says global oil inventories are heading straight to all-time record lows by the end of May. Complacency rules because the human mind simply cannot grasp something this enormous. And it says the bottom line, Eric Natal, who I think is the guy being interviewed there, has spent 25 years in this market and calls this the biggest disruption of his lifetime. The world is sleepwalking into a supply shock that will force prices higher faster than anyone can expect. Then it ends it with, this is the calm before the storm hits hard. And that's what Kirill Dmitriev is quote posting. So let's go and look at some of the things that he's posted. Well, before we go look at the things he's posted since then, let's go back, because he says right here, as predicted more than 2 months ago. That was from 18 hours ago. And he's quote posting Al Jazeera, breaking news. Chevron CEO says physical shortages in oil supply begin to appear. And so he's saying, yeah, we called that 2 months ago. And so here, let's go back and look at that. Here is April 6th. For the first time in history, Saudi Arabia is charging a $20 per barrel premium over the already sky-high benchmark for its oil. A catastrophic oil shortage is imminent. And then he includes a chart of what Aramco charges the premium over, and it fluctuates between, it looks like something like 25 cents a barrel all the way up to what, $9.50, something like that, $9.75, and now it's at $20 a barrel. It even looks like maybe it was at zero. There was no premium in early 2026. And then he says, this is from April 15th, all as predicted, the UK-EU Don't Look Up movie is getting to a dramatic ending. The fuel shortage meteorite is already here and getting closer, triggered by the Iran conflict, but caused by fighting Russian energy. And he's quote posting Jim Ferguson, who says, Britain facing a fuel shock within weeks. The real crisis for Britain and for Europe will come at the end of May, or at the end of April and early May. If this is true, here's what follows. Fuel shortages begin to bite, not just price rises, but physical scarcity. Diesel pushes well beyond €2 per liter, hitting transport, farming, and supply chains. First, flights cut, deliveries delayed, supermarket logistics strained. Commuting becomes a luxury, and working from home shifts from convenience to necessity. Businesses face rising costs. Some reduce hours, others shut temporarily. Panic buying risks returning. This time, not just fuel, but goods depending on it. And the real pressure point, a slow cumulative squeeze, not a sudden collapse, but a grinding disruption across daily life. Okay, so let's just listen. Let's listen to what this guy says, and then we'll carry on.
I am concerned. I think there's such a lot of noise and competing messages that it's important to go back to the facts. We've now had 6 weeks during which none of the tankers have come through Hormuz. Those tankers take weeks to get to their destination, and we're now running out of the tankers that set off before the war began. So there's now going to be a real gap in supply, and I think the boss of Shell said it a couple of weeks ago, and I think he was exactly right, that the real crisis for Britain and for Europe will come at the end of April and in early May, when the real shortage will translate into both a physical shortage and a sharp rise in prices. I don't think we've yet seen the full impact on prices of this loss of supply.
And what sort of prices are we talking about? You know, diesel is now in some places £2. Are we? How much north of that can it go?
Well, it could go a good deal north of that. The jet fuel price has doubled, and I think that could go further north as well. I think there's been a degree of complacency and a belief that Mr. Trump would always come back into line and there would be a deal and then everything would be okay. Now you see, I think there are 240 ships trapped in the Gulf. and none now entering. So this is going to be a cumulative shortage over the next few months. Some countries, I think, particularly in Asia, where the crisis has hit earliest, they're taking an extra day a week at home. People are being encouraged to work at home. And I think you have to test now whether there's a willingness. And as I read the behavioral science, people do respond. They don't all do it perfectly, but they respond if other people are responding and if there's a lead which is seen as part of a rational policy.
So it could be
we're getting to that.
So the government could say, as part of this allocation, we would encourage, if you can, you to work from home, for example.
Yes, I think that would be a perfectly sensible measure.
Okay. And so, again, it's really important to evaluate this because I think that there's many facets to this Iran conflict and what the intended outcome is and what the intention is behind doing it. I don't think that Iran is the target of it. There could be elements of Iran that are being dealt with through the conflict, of course. Certainly open to that. But ostensibly, given the behavior of Iran and the things that we've seen them say and do, they seemed they seemed far more prepared for this conflict than Israel did. That's just my take on it, right? Israel is not doing well right now. We will get to them eventually. But I want to focus on Europe because Europe is, I think, just as much a target here. And what is being exacerbated is what I mentioned this morning on Badlands Daily. And that was this picture from the G20. Or I'm sorry, this was the G7, I think, the group of seven from 2018, which took place in Canada. The famous picture where the Japanese bros are standing behind Trump and Trump is just staring down Merkel. And I remember this was a funny anecdote because I distinctly remember at the time reading an anecdote about Trump sitting there cross-armed. And these are people like writing this stuff, trying to cast Trump in a negative light, you know, calling him petulant and childish. But Merkel is sitting there fuming in the room because she can't believe what Trump's saying to him. And Trump is sitting there sucking on a piece of candy. This is how the anecdote goes. And he throws a piece of candy at her and says, "Cheer up." But what they're arguing about is NATO. And the point Trump is making is that Europe doesn't have an energy program. It doesn't have an energy sector. Europe has decided to basically eliminate all quote unquote fossil fuels, which is not really an accurate moniker. That's a separate discussion, but to eliminate all their oil and gas programs for green energy, which has been a total disaster for Europe. It's been a terrible investment with no yield, basically. And it's made them completely dependent on imports, specifically from Russia. And the point Trump was making at the time is, why the hell is the United States paying for the defense of Germany and the rest of Europe from Russia when Russia is like your saving grace? Russia is the only reason you still have electricity in your country. This is retarded. At the very least, you should be paying whatever it was, 3%. Yet 3% of your GDP should be going into NATO, just like the United States pays whatever percentage we paid, 5%, 3%. We're funding this thing by ourselves, and you should be paying your fair share. And if you refuse to pay your fair share, we're leaving, and you can fight Russia on your own. And remember, this is 2018. This is during that 6-year ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, which we covered on the Book of Trump. At the end of the war in Donbass. In 2015, 2016, when they signed that ceasefire. And so that's what Trump is referring to. Like, I think President Trump is bringing this entire narrative to head now, because we're now 8 years later and Europe has not fixed this problem. In fact, Europe has made this problem far worse. It has gotten us into this. It's now a 4-year war with Russia, where Ukraine is bleeding out, and I guess we aren't sending them money anymore, but we were sending them hundreds of billions of dollars. Europe is sending them a bunch of money and equipment, and Ukraine is obviously losing. In fact, Trump even said that. He said that Ukraine, I think we covered that on the other day, that he said that Ukraine is losing, and nobody wants to say it, but Ukraine is lost effectively, right? So what the hell are we doing? Why are we fighting? Why is NATO fighting Russia through Ukraine? And yet you can't, like, you're refusing to buy energy from Russia. And Kirill Dmitriev has been railing, absolutely railing Europe over this for months now, and just being like, y'all are stupid. You have no idea what's coming for you. One day you're going to wake up and you're just not going to have oil anymore. You're not going to have any energy. And Europe has basically just been riding everybody's coattails and being like, yeah, it's never going to happen. Like they're like a naive child, right? Waiting for a little bit of lag here. Hold on. All right, sorry about that. I think we had a little bit of lag there. So again, let's go to Kirill Dmitriev's posts 18 hours ago, as predicted more than 2 months ago. So let's look at some of the posts that he's doing recently. So after that, 13 hours ago, so last night, he says, yes, EU's wrong and woke ideology continues to drive disastrous decisions. And this person he is quote posting says, to sum it up, the EU cut itself off from Russian oil and gas, is suffering from unprecedented energy supply issues from the Middle East, has industrial energy costs 2 to 3 times higher than its competition, produces 40% less electricity than the US, despite having 33% more people and 75% less electricity than China. And their move right now in this context is to deliberately raise the cost and slow the rollout of Chinese solar, the cheapest and fastest deploying form of electricity in the market, on the flimsy pretext it's a security threat. You'd think the bigger security threat would be having your industrial base relocate to countries that didn't voluntarily price themselves out of energy, or for that matter, ensuring that any new AI infrastructure or industrial projects gets built anywhere but Europe beyond parity. And this guy's quote posting from Disclosed TV. Just in, the EU blocks funds for key Chinese solar energy parts from November 1st, citing security concerns as imported inverters could be used to manipulate energy networks and gain unauthorized access to operational data, which could lead to countrywide blackouts. Well, it's great that you're now worried, and this is from Financial Times. It's great that you're now worried about your energy infrastructure, your energy security. You should have been worried about that 10 years ago when you were shutting down all your coal plants, your oil plants, your gas plants. You weren't producing any more gas. You weren't producing any more oil. And, it was all because you wanted all that hippy dippy bullshit about green energy, which all turned out to be a scam, all turned out to be a lie. And Trump tried to be nice to them. He tried to tell them, hey, this is a problem. You're going to face this problem. You're going to face this problem alone if you're not careful. We, the United States, are not following you down this suicide pact that you've all signed together. They didn't listen. And Trump's been in office now for over a year, for what, 15 months, going on 16 months. He's tried to get them to end the war in Ukraine. They refuse to end the war in Ukraine. They're going to defend the Ukraine down to the last man. Doesn't make any sense. And they refuse to buy Russian energy and Russian oil. Okay, then you know what? Let's do the Strait of Hormuz. Like, let's just give you the squeeze that you've been asking for. And Europe is going to be brought to its knees. I think that's what we're going to see next, is Europe brought to its knees. And they're basically going to be forced to take whatever deal President Trump gives them. Because I think they signed if I'm not mistaken, the EU signed a deal almost exactly a year ago. I want to say it was like May 11th of last year. It was middle of May, maybe May 19th. First, it was with Britain, right? And basically the deal he signed with Britain set up Europe, and the EU was pissed because they were like, this deal that Britain just signed with the United States is basically setting up Europe to get screwed. And that's exactly what happened. And then like a week later, he went and met with the EU, and the EU gave away the house. And all of these officials in the EU were super pissed because the EU agreed to buy natural gas exclusively from President Trump, from America, and not to develop any of its own natural gas sector for many, many years. And now they're probably regretting signing that, I would imagine. But, it is what it is. The art of the deal. So, and if you think about it, if these people are the reason that the United States has been plundered, and it very much is, I can assure you of that. We will look into that a little bit. Then bringing their economy, bringing them to their knees, and destroying them, not the European continent, not the European people, not the European nation state, which has already been greatly dismantled by the European Union, but rather the European elite, who are a bunch of satanic pedophiles, and basically just the inheritors of a system, an aristocracy that has exploited its people for centuries. Not only its people, but the world, really, when you think about imperialism and the age of empire. Okay, so last clip I want to play. Actually, two more clips I want to play and I'm sorry we're going clip heavy today, but this is a big deal. This is something that we need to take in as much data as possible, because as all of these people are saying, you're going to see nobody's paying attention to this. Everybody's caught up with the shiny objects, the Lego movies that Iran is putting out, the funny comments that Trump is making. Everyone's distracted with the shiny objects, and they're not paying attention to what's actually going on with the oil market. So here's Eric Bolling on War Room this morning. This is just 1 minute, but let's listen to this.
Briefly yesterday, we had this little discussion about, well, there's those who believe, let's get this thing open. I'm in that camp. I wish we had just made a deal early. People jumped on me, calling me, oh, you idiot, don't you know they hate us? They want to deliver a nuke. I think at that point, you may have agreed. But then yesterday, Steve, you remember when Mr. Miyagi had the pebble and Karate Kid had to snatch it and he couldn't for a long time? Well, you're my Mr. Miyagi. You're my true north. You're my OG conservative. They may have snatched the pebble from you, my friend, because yesterday you were complaining about, yes, but the high price of diesel fuel, which is very relevant, but you can't have both. You can't have lower gas and diesel prices and a regime change in the same moment. You can have either or, but you're going to sacrifice one or the other. There's literally no out. There's no easy out at this point of, yes, we can get gas prices lower for the midterms, but yeah, we'll also get these fanatical Muslims who just want to kill us and they'll die before we win anything to relent.
Yeah, so I think, I don't necessarily agree with what Eric Bolling's saying here, but this is certainly one of the narratives that's out here, where he says you can't have lower gas prices and regime change in Iran at the same time. You want cheaper fuel for the midterms, all right. You're also getting these fanatical Muslims who will die before they will give you anything. He's right in the fact that that I think they're willing to bleed out themselves while bleeding out the rest of the world. However, I don't think it's because they're radical Muslims. I don't think it's because they're fanatical Muslims. I do think it's because they have an ideology and they're disciplined and they understand warfare. And let me demonstrate that to you, because we actually have a video now that I just saw over the weekend of Soleimani talking about this back in the 90s. So let me pull this up. Here it is. Okay, so this post says, in the 1990s, at the IRGC University of Command and Staff, future Commander Hussein Soleimani, now a martyr, taught a course on asymmetric warfare. He instructed officers on prolonging a conflict with the U.S. by escalating economic costs and political instability. Even then, they were already plotting the downfall of the evil empire. And they're referring to us when they say that. And by the way, I wouldn't totally disagree with them that it is an evil empire. I mean, just look at the way that our leaders talk about the situation and have for many, many years. And again, this is rhetoric that I think Trump is adopting and then espouting because it's encouraging those people to come out and espout it again. And it's just clearly defining to everybody what the U.S. government is and what the U.S. political system is. So let's listen to Soleimani here. This is all going to be in Farsi, so I'm going to read it to you. I'm not going to play the sound. I'll read what he's saying. But again, this isn't about like glorifying Soleimani or anything like that. This is communicating the fact that, if this video is out here on X, surely the U.S. military, the U.S. intelligence services, the president of the United States knew all of this. And this is probably how the game theory gets developed against Iran. Like, Trump doesn't have to be in direct collusion with the Iranian government or the IRGC to pull this thing off, right? He just has to understand what their incentive structure is, what their plan is, what their playbook is, and then basically manipulate the conditions of the battle space so that they run the playbook that he wants them to run, which is ultimately going to impact this third party over here, which is Israel, the UAE, Europe, etc. So let's play this. Okay, so Soleimani says, oh, come on. Sorry about that. I think it froze again. Okay. So he says, we are saying that we should take the war to a different field. Remember, this is the 1990s. We're not saying that we can win as in 100%, but we're saying the war, and this is, I think he's talking about a hypothetical war against the West, a hypothetical war against the United States. So a hypothetical war against Israel and by extension, the United States. He says, but we're saying the war should be extended to a field where we can wage asymmetric warfare. So if the enemy simply wants to use its air power, the ability of America's regional enemies to respond to this air power is limited. But if the war is dragged from the air to the sea and on land, the chance of conflict with American forces is very possible, and the possibility of victory really exists. This form of war, where we are moving the war with America to the area of our own capabilities, into the area of America's weaknesses, makes this type of battle possible. And this type of battle has the possibility of victory, as in Vietnam. The advantages we consider an asymmetric battle are efficiency and effectiveness. Many enemy advanced weapon systems are neutralized and ineffective. As in, let's put it this way and say, for example, a large American ship is brought to the Persian Gulf. Okay, so he's going to describe the exact situation that we have going on right now with the Strait of Hormuz. All right, so a large American ship comes to the Persian Gulf. This large ship was built to counter a Soviet-built ship of the same size. But when this same ship is faced with a number of speedboats, it loses its efficiency and effectiveness. This is why one of the advantages of symmetrical and asymmetrical warfare is that, to some extent, it disarms the enemy. Another advantage of symmetrical warfare is that the economic costs of this type of battle are also asymmetrical. This allows for the possibility of eroding the war and prolonging it. We say this because the advantage is that our enemies, the superpowers, are looking to shorten their time in the war as much as possible. This shortening is for several reasons. One is because the economic cost of the Americans taking action in far off areas is really very high. And another one of them is that casualties are not acceptable. A student's, he's asking the students, and one of the students says not acceptable. And he says, yes, not acceptable. They seek quick victories. And one of the advantages is that this creates political tensions within their countries. That is, through this work, presidents are changed, and in general, domestic political structures become tense due to the prolongation of the war. Okay, so this is where this is where studying your enemy is how you win battles. This is where like people get so triggered when you're like, hey, have you ever read the Communist Manifesto? Hey, have you ever read Mein Kampf? Hey, have you ever read like have you ever looked into like what the Iranian like our IRGC is teaching and believing? No, why would I do that? Why would I care what the Muslims are doing? You know? Well, if you want to win a war against the Muslims, or if you want to understand how they would engage in war, you better go listen to what they're teaching. This is back in the 90s, before the Iraq war, before the war on the global war on terror, right? Where the only example we really had to go off of was Vietnam as for like a forever war. And here is Soleimani teaching to his students, like IRGC officers, hey, we want to wage asymmetrical warfare. We know we can't win. The point isn't to win. The point is to make the war last as long as possible. And by doing so, make the political and economic cost to the United States as severe as possible. Because the longer the war goes on, the more it costs them financially, which means the more it costs them politically. And then we get regime change in the United States, a new president. And eventually they'll have to, surrender, go home with their tail between their legs like we did in Vietnam. And of course, that's exactly what happened in the Middle East, right? 25-year war with nothing to show for it, $6 trillion war. And now we're doing exactly what he is describing right here with the Strait of Hormuz. We're sending giant warships to the, purportedly to the Strait of Hormuz. And this is obviously a long time before drones existed, like flying drones. Airborne drones, but then also like the boat, like the surface level, like water drones, right? The boat drones. But he is describing, so I guess the speedboats he's describing here would be manned speedboats, which we've heard about in Iran for decades. But he's saying, yeah, the point of the speedboats isn't to like destroy the battleship, the American naval ship. The point is to get them to expend so much ammunition and waste fuel sitting there, floating around, driving around in circles in the Persian Gulf, that they bleed themselves out. They put themselves in tremendous debt, and they basically just waste a bunch of time and money and then have nothing to show for it because we're never going to give up. He's like, so like I've seen for the past 15, 20 years online, people laugh and make fun of the Iranians for sending out these little speedboats to take on like a giant naval ship, thinking like, oh yeah, like what are you going to do with that little speedboat? Well, they're not going to do anything with it. Like the speedboat's going to get blown out of the water. But every time we fire something at that speedboat, we're probably firing a projectile that costs more than the speedboat does, right? Just like with the drones, the airborne drones, this is their strategy. Their strategy is not to defeat us. Their strategy is just to survive. That's all they have to do. All they have to do is survive. All right. And just continue to send drones out, continue to send speedboats out, continue to do all that stuff. And then we bleed out economically, which then leads to political bleed out, which then leads to regime change in the form of like a changing of the guard with a quote unquote election and a new political party. This is their strategy. And you can absolutely bet your last dollar that President Trump has seen this video and understands that this is what they were thinking all along. This is what they were teaching. We already went through a few months ago the continuity of government plan that they enacted back in August. I mean, they are hunkered down and prepared for this. They were ready for this back in the 90s. They were getting ready for this. We weren't getting ready for a war with Iran back in the 90s. We weren't even ready for the war with Iraq back in the 90s, right? We went in there, bombed the shit out of Baghdad, won the war in like a few hours, right? And then just stayed there and hung out for 25 years and bled out financially, right? This is their strategy. Their strategy is to do exactly that, just get us to bleed out. And to that point, we now have, let me pull this up. Where did that go? Right here. So this is from Arab News, and this has been a development for a few days now. But U.S. says Iran ceasefire holds despite exchange of fire in the Gulf. Hegseth held a press conference this morning. He said, we're not looking for a fight. Iran's parliament speaker said breaches of the ceasefire by the U.S. and its allies had endangered shipping through the strait. Washington said Iran had not breached a fragile ceasefire in the Middle East conflict on Tuesday, following an exchange of fire between two sides the previous day as U.S. forces attempted to force open the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. military said it had destroyed 6 Iranian small boats. So here you go. They're little speedboats they're talking about, as well as cruise missiles and drones after President Donald Trump sent the Navy to escort stranded tankers through the strait in a campaign he called Project Freedom. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the operation to protect commercial ships was temporary and the 4-week-old truce was not over. "Quote unquote, we're not looking for a fight," he told a press conference on Tuesday. "Right now, the ceasefire certainly holds, but we're going to be watching very, very closely." Iran fired missiles at U.S. ships on Monday and attacked the United Arab Emirates, a key regional ally of Washington, with missiles and drones. Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammed Bakir Kalibaf, said breaches of the ceasefire by the U.S. and its allies had endangered shipping. We know well that the continuation. So he said Iran's speaker said that the United States actions has threatened the Strait of Hormuz and its operations. "Quote, we know well that the continuation of the current situation is unbearable for the United States while we have not even begun yet," he said in a social media post. The narrow strait has been virtually shut since the United States and Israel began attacks on Iran on February 28th, triggering disruptions that have pushed up commodity prices around the world. Hegseth said the U.S. had successfully secured a path through critical waterways and that hundreds of commercial ships were lining up to pass through. Several merchant ships in the Gulf reported explosions or fires on Monday, and an oil port in the UAE, which hosts a large U.S. military base, was set ablaze by Iranian missiles. The UAE reimposed flight restrictions on its airspace on Tuesday. Iran has effectively sealed off the strait by threatening to deploy mines, drones, missiles, and fast attack craft. The United States has countered by blockading Iranian ports, mounting escorted transits for commercial vessels. The U.S. military said 2 U.S. merchant ships made it through the strait without saying when, with the support of Navy-guided missile destroyers. Iran denied any crossings had taken place, though shipping company Maersk said the Alliance Fairfax, a U.S. flagship, exited the Gulf under U.S. military escort on Monday. The commander of U.S. forces in the region said his fleet had destroyed 6 small Iranian boats, which Iran had also denied. Iranian media quoted a military commander as saying U.S. forces targeted civilian and cargo vessels, killing 5 civilians. Iran also said it fired warning shots at a U.S. warship approaching the strait, forcing it to turn back. Reuters could not independently verify events in the strait as the two sides issued contradictory statements. And that's the key right there. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that since the ceasefire was announced on April 7th, Iran had fired at commercial vessels 9 times and seized 2 container ships. He said Iran has attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times. However, the attacks fell, quote, below the threshold of restarting major combat operations at this point, Kane told reporters. So before we continue, let's just circle back and talk about what they're saying there. As long as the U.S. and Iran are calling the other side a liar, right? Number one, this is potentially all narrative, okay? But even if it's not narrative, even if this is actually happening, like even if these events as being reported are actually happening, as long as the other side is denying that they're actually happening and saying they're lying, that never happened, then Pete Hegseth can say all day, yeah, nothing's been violated because nothing happened. You know, like, yeah, there's no violation. We're not going to continue the war. Meanwhile, Israel is over here jumping up and down, screaming to restart the war. No, we're not going to restart the war. All right, so let's continue in the article. UAE oil port ablaze. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Monday's events showed there was no military solution to the crisis. He said peace talks were progressing with Pakistan's mediation and warned the U.S. and UAE against being drawn into a quagmire. Araghchi was traveling to Beijing on Tuesday for talks with his Chinese counterpart. His ministry said Iranian authorities released a map of what they said was an expanded maritime area now under Iranian control, stretching beyond the strait to include lengthy sections sections of the UAE coastline after a day of reported drone and missile attacks inside the UAE on Monday, including one that caused a fire at Fujairah, an important oil port. The UAE said Iranian attacks marked a serious escalation and it reserved the right to respond. The Iranian map included Fujairah and another Emirati port, Khor Fakkan, both of which lie on the Gulf of Oman, in which the UAE has relied on since the start of the conflict to bypass the block strait. Iran state television said military officials had confirmed that they attacked the UAE in response to the U.S. military's adventurism, quote unquote. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about the peace efforts has stalled. The war in the Middle East has already killed thousands and roiled the global economy. U.S. and Iranian officials have held one round of face-to-face peace talks, but attempts to set up further meetings have failed. Trump has said the U.S.-Israeli attacks aimed to eliminate what he called imminent threats from Iran, citing its nuclear and ballistic missile program, its support for Hamas and Hezbollah, and its menacing activities. Iranian state media said on Sunday that the U.S. had conveyed its response to a 14-point Iranian proposal via Pakistan, and Iran was reviewing it. Neither side gave details. A senior Pakistani official involved in the talks said backdoor diplomacy was continuing. We have put we have put in a lot of efforts. Actually, both the sides have narrowed gaps on majority issues, the source said. Tehran's proposal would defer talks on its nuclear energy and research programs until after agreements to end the war and on shipping security. Trump said over the weekend he was still studying it, but would likely reject it. Trump has insisted Iran must surrender its enriched uranium stockpiles to prevent it from producing a nuclear weapon, an ambition Tehran denies. And so here's CENTCOM talking about the 6 Iran boats that were shot down, as well as some drones. So here's CENTCOM's post they put on X. Says U.S. Central Command, the claim. Iranian state media claims that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps hit a U.S. warship with 2 missiles. The truth is, no U.S. Navy ships have been struck. U.S. forces are supporting Project Freedom and enforcing the naval blockade on Iranian ports. It looks like Marco Rubio's briefing the media. No, it hasn't started yet. That's interesting because we haven't gotten. Do y'all remember Tammy? What was her name? Tammy. I forget her last name, but she was the spokesperson for the State Department. She was fired back in July. It wasn't announced as a firing. It was announced as moving her to the where did they move him to? The EU or the UN, the United Nations. They moved her to the UN. We haven't really had any State Department press briefings since then, right? I mean, Rubio gets up and says comments every now and again, so that's notable. He's doing that. I'll be interested to see what is said from that. So then here's Trump. Here's Trump. Iran should wave the white flag. Let's listen to Trump.
Golden age so these next few years will be a golden age for American sports, just like it's a golden age for America. You know, we hit an all-time high stock market today, despite that we're in a little skirmish military. I call it a skirmish because Iran has no chance. They never did. They know it. They express it to me when I talk to them. Then they get on television. They say how well they're doing. Iran wants to make a deal. What I don't like about Iran is they'll talk to me with such great respect, and then they'll go on television. They'll say, we did not speak to the president. We did not. I just spoke to. We did not speak to the president. So they play games. But let me just tell you, they want to make a deal. And who wouldn't? When your military is totally gone, we could do anything we want to them. Who wouldn't?
Yeah. Okay, so I want to get back to the economic impact on this and the result and kind of, how this resolution is shaping up. This is from Zero Hedge. Hormuz deserted as Iran expands area of control. Hundreds of ships clustered near Dubai. The Strait of Hormuz has become a ghost town, air strait, with traffic grinding to a complete halt as no new commercial ship crossings were recorded despite a U.S. effort to guide vessels through the waterway, according to Bloomberg. While Maersk confirmed that its vessel Alliance Fairfax transited the strait on Monday under U.S. military protection, Tuesday saw zero traffic following a day of violence that included attacks on vessels and missile strikes targeting the United Arab Emirates. Confusion was rampant after Washington maintained that a safe passage exists, with 2 U.S. destroyers reportedly entering the Gulf, but the heightened tensions kept commercial shipping at bay. Okay, then they're posting these maps, these OSINT maps, may or may not be real, claiming U.S. destroyers are spotted. I was under the impression that these maps weren't available anymore commercially. These satellite images. Okay, so on Monday, 2 U.S. vessels. Come on. All right. On Monday, 2 U.S. vessels, one of them a vehicle carrier, moved out of the Persian Gulf under military escort while keeping their vessels. What is going on here? Sorry, the computer's freaking out a little bit. Why is it jumping around like this? All right. On Monday, 2 U.S. vessels, one of them a vehicle carrier, moved out of the Persian Gulf under military escort while keeping their tracking signals off. Visible outbound activity during the same period was limited to an Iran-linked liquefied petroleum gas carrier, a small feeder container ship, and a tiny regional cargo ship. Ships transiting Hormuz with an active AIS signals over the past day were confined to the narrow northern lane approved by Tehran. Also, widespread AIS spoofing has further clouded the picture, making independent verification of ship traffic virtually impossible. And then there's just a bunch of pictures just showing what are purportedly clusters of ships. All right. So let's take commercial break real quick. We'll be back in a minute. Geopolitics Ghost.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Maha yourself with supplements that don't suck from Conscious Strength. Founded by Badlands' very own Jordan Sather in 2019, Conscious Strength products are made in America and won't break your bank, unlike other online brands. Their lineup includes collagen for strengthening joints and hair, electrolytes to get rid of those cramps, greens powders that taste good and mixes easy, Shilajit gummies, methylene blue, zeolite, and more. Flip the finger to pharma, be your own doctor, and get supplements you can trust from Conscious Strength. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/strength to shop now and use promo code Badlands for 10% off. One more time, badlandsmedia.tv/strength. The link will be in the description below this video. And check out episode 5 of America First Stories to learn more about Jordan and Conscious Strength.
Last winter, the world met Madame Margie, the moistureless. But while Badlandia banded together at GART, she evolved. While deep in her layer, she uncovered 4 sacred instruments of hydration. The lip balm, the lotion, the tallow bar, and the new stainless steel gua sha. Together, they wage war. Flaking has fallen, roughness retreats, dryness trembles, and among the rebels, Mother's good boy. But elsewhere in Badlandia, rebellion grows, the beards remain.
Shave them all off.
Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Mama's Boy for 20% off your Mother's Day bundle. And when you buy 2 Mother's Day bundles, you get an 11-ounce lavender vanilla for free. For softness, for victory, for moms.
These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA.
All right, we are back. It's hour 2 of Geopolitics Ghost. Host Gordon McCormick, aka the Ghost of Base Patrick Henry. This is Badlands Media. Today is May the 5th, 2026. And yeah, we're going to keep going here. Okay. So let's pull up. Let's go down. Let's see. Before we go to the UAE, because I want to talk about the UAE. Let's go back to that story about Chevron, because now we got Chevron's CEO talking about this. And I think I reported it this morning on Badlands Daily that Chevron and Exxon have both said we're not going to comply with President Trump's request to boost output, right? The UAE had left OPEC, right? And then 188,000 barrels increase from OPEC during their Sunday meeting, which comes out to 5.6 million barrels per month additional output. And let me pull this up. We have Yeah, and so here's ExxonMobil and Chevron addressing supply concerns. Um, Chevron and Exxon said they're not going to they're not going to boost their output. We also had a disruption for their earnings. So 4 days ago, ExxonMobil and Chevron earnings fall as Iran war disrupts oil shipping. That's from May 1st. Um, Exxon and Chevron's profits fell compared to last year despite surging oil prices due to the Iran war. Okay, so now let's look at Chevron's CEO. So this is from this morning. All right, so that's interesting. Like they're Chevron's basically saying that the rest of the world's going to suffer a lot more than we are. So now when we look at the UAE, so let's go to the UAE now. Because I think what's happening, and this is just speculation, but I think what's happening with the UAE is similar to what happened to Qatar in 2017. Remember, 2017, we got the sword dance happens in May of 2017. Trump goes to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, signs a joint counterterrorism deal with Tamim of Qatar. A month later, Mohammed bin Salman becomes the crown prince of Saudi Arabia and immediately declares war on Qatar, citing a number of reasons that the Qatar had the Muslim Brotherhood there, that they were a deep state hub, and goes on to conduct like a 4-year asymmetric warfare campaign, non-violent, like no kinetic action, mostly economic, cyber, etc., psychological. And then the net effect of all of that is that Qatar at the end of it, because they sign a peace treaty in January 15th, 2021, 5 days before Trump leaves office. And that's after Trump promises Tamim in September of 2017 that he would help him navigate the situation with Saudi. And now all of a sudden, Qatar is like a great ally of ours. They've always been an ally. They've always been helpful, but they were, a hub for the CIA, MI6, Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood. All kinds of just bad stuff, right? Remember, they were sending money to Hamas through the Israeli government, through Netanyahu for years, right? Propping up Hamas against the Palestinian Authority. And now all of a sudden, they're not doing that anymore, right? During the Biden administration, Qatar starts to become this great mediator, negotiating peace between countries that were in conflict, and it starts to rebrand itself as like a peace-seeking culture. Now all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia finds itself at war or in conflict with the UAE, and this is something that's been brewing now for years, really. And I can't help but wonder if we're going to see the same thing happen with the UAE and the war and like the conflict and what's happening to the UAE with them being bombed and everything is a product of that, is a product of that situation with Saudi Arabia and UAE falling like into disagreement. So here's the story again from Arab News. UAE attacked by missiles and drones from Iran for second day. The UAE's defense ministry says sounds heard in areas. I'm sorry, did not have that playing. I apologize, guys. UAE attacked by missiles and drones from Iran for second day. UAE's defense ministry says sounds heard in areas of country are interceptions of missiles and drone strikes come a day after Iranian attacks caused a fire in Fujairah, wounding 3. So we've already read through that. Here is the UAE and South Korea completing talks for a bilateral trade deal. This is October 16th, 2023. Okay. So here's April 30th, 2026. UAE and South Korea activate trade deal to boost investment and exports. So that bilateral trade deal that they're signing here, SEPA, UAE SEPA, is activated 6 days ago. It says agreement is expected to deepen economic cooperation, expand market access. The UAE and South Korea have brought their comprehensive economic partnership agreement, SEPA, into force, marking a new phase in trade and investment ties between the two economies. The agreement is expected to deepen economic cooperation, expand market access, and support private sector activity across key industries, including technology, manufacturing, and logistics. Under SEPA, the tariffs will be reduced or eliminated on 91.2% of traded goods and services, making it easier for businesses in both countries to access each other's markets. The deal also aims to remove non-tariff barriers, improve regulatory alignment, and create a structured framework for investment and collaboration in sectors such as renewable energy, healthcare, and advanced technology. This is South Korea's first trade agreement with a country in the Gulf Cooperation Council and wider Middle East and North Africa region. Non-oil trade between the UAE and South Korea reached $6.9 billion in 2025, and officials expect the agreement to accelerate growth in bilateral trade volumes. The UAE is already South Korea's largest trading partner in the GCC, with both countries holding around $10 billion in mutual investments. Officials said the agreement will support exporters by opening new channels into Asian markets while strengthening supply chains. And so they're activating this as there's this war being conducted from Iran on the UAE. And then this happens. Then we get from Trump. Stand by for processing. Sorry, we have right here. Bam. Okay, so this is from yesterday. Iran has taken some shots at unrelated nations with respect to the ship movement, Project Freedom, including a South Korean cargo ship. Perhaps it's time for South Korea to come and join the mission. We've shot down 7 small boats, or as they like to call them, fast boats. It's all they have left. Other than the South Korean ship, there has been, at this moment, no damage going through the strait. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane will have a news conference tomorrow morning. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump. So here's Trump yesterday, 4 days after the UAE and South Korea activate this deal that they signed 3 years ago. Suddenly a South Korean ship gets blown up or attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, and Trump says, hey, we should, like South Korea, you should get your ass over here and y'all should step up and y'all should start pulling your weight because this is impacting you now. That's interesting to me. And that speaks to this conflict that I think is happening between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But it seems to be about the UAE like extracting this evil twin, this bad element out of the UAE. Here's Saudi Arabia condemning the fresh attacks on the UAE, calling for return to talks. Prince Mohammed bin Salman reaffirmed his country's support for the security and stability of the UAE, the Saudi press agency reported. The call came after the UAE's Ministry of Defense intercepted 12 ballistic missiles, 3 cruise missiles, and 4 drones launched from Iran on Monday, resulting in 3 minor attacks. The UAE says the arsenal of munitions that had been fired by Iran, a claim since denied by the Islamic Republic. So the Islamic Republic is saying they didn't even fire this. Yeah, but that's interesting. So was it a false flag? Was it actually fired by Iran? We'll have to wait and see. Or maybe we won't see. Maybe we won't ever find out. But as far as, let's see, UAE, the Sharjah. So there's this other weird thing that I keep seeing coming up and don't know if it's real. Don't know what to make of it. But, the UAE is 7 different kingdoms combined into one country. The Emirates, right? Each one of them is its own little, I don't know what you call it. I guess like Emir. I guess that's where the word Emir comes from. So there's 7 of them, and this is floating around social media. I've kind of held off on like talking about it because I just don't know if it's real or not, but it's what's out there. So we'll see if it's real or not. Like I guess we'll see what comes of it. So Sharjah is one of the, so here's the map. Okay. So you have Abu Dhabi is the largest one, the orange, right? And then you have Dubai, which is blue. And then you have Sharjah, which is this green one. And then I guess Fujairah is the purple one. And then the yellow one is Ras Al Khaimah. And then I can't even say these words, but point is you got 7 of them. All right. And the biggest one is Abu Dhabi. The second biggest one is Dubai. And then the third biggest one is Sharjah. Okay. So what has been floated out there? Here's a post talking about it. Internal rumors indicate that the Emir of Sharjah, one of the emirates that make up the United Arab Emirates, will declare independence from the Union, announcing the creation of the Republic of Sharjah. The United Arab Emirates is in a critical situation following the conflict with Iran. Its economy, entirely dependent on gas and oil exports, has collapsed. I actually don't think that's true, but we'll get back to that in a second. Along with the drop in tourism in cities like Dubai and the massive losses caused by real estate speculators operating in the country who withdrew their investments after the UAE became a target of Iran and had numerous facilities directly hit by Iranian missiles and drones. The Emirate of Sharjah is the most conservative, cultural, and Islamic region in the country, with its political leadership openly opposed to the alignment of the capital, Abu Dhabi, with the U.S. and Israel. One of the consequences of the conflict with Iran was to definitively prove that the U.S. lacks the capacity to effectively defend UAE territory, further reinforcing this opposition to military relations with the Zionist bloc. In a recent move, the Emir of Sharjah issued decrees creating a more independent judicial authority in the emirate outside of certain federal aspects, officially signaling his discontent with Abu Dhabi's policies. Officially, the Emir Sheikh Sultan bin Mohammed Al Qasimi, governor of Sharjah, gives speeches defending the national unity of the UAE. However, behind the scenes, rumors point to his desire to declare independence and create the Republic of Sharjah. If this comes to pass, the Republic of Sharjah is created. The entire geopolitics of the Middle East will be profoundly redefined, where countries considered artificial, governed with an iron fist by monarchies that stay in power through U.S. influence in the region will have their days numbered. This is a clear sign of the collapse of the petrodollar scheme, which directly depends on the pact between the U.S. and Gulf countries to sustain itself. With the independence of one of its emirates, the balance of power in the region will shift and will possibly encourage more peoples' nations to rise up against the domination of monarchies and artificial states created by the U.S. and England in the region, dating back to the times of British colonialism. So here's a video. So the Poly Market has a new. You can place a bet to see if this guy Al Qasimi is going to be arrested by May 31st. There are people out there saying that this is a rumor and it's been debunked. And then here is another video claiming this. Here's the same guy. He's older in this video, saying that here he is in this video, that he's declaring independence in this video, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So I don't know if this is real or not. I've seen this everywhere. This rumor is out there everywhere that Sharjah is about to break away from the UAE, but the PSYOP is out there. The PSYOP is real. Whether or not the actuals are real is a different question. But it's very clear that the UAE is coming under like multiple attacks from multiple different angles, including psychological warfare. And the rumors are that the UAE is losing money, that money is leaving UAE banks, and that the UAE is pulling money out of the European banks. Let me see. That claim, by the way, in that post that the UAE is entirely dependent on the oil and gas is not true. UAE, I think it's like 30% of their investment fund is like they actually divested. They did what Saudi Arabia is trying to do right now. They did that like 20 years ago. They called it UAE Vision 2015. So by 2015, they wanted to be out of oil and gas. They didn't want to be dependent on oil and gas. And so let's see. So tourist identity with the UAE banks. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for UAE pulling its money out of Western banks. Yeah, so here, drop in UAE monetary supply poses challenge for banks. Rising interbank lending rates and a declining monetary base indicate the UAE banking system is under strain, economists have said, with the central bank likely to intervene again to help lenders. The U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, which started on February 28th, has hurt important UAE economic sectors such as aviation, tourism, energy, and consumer-focused industries, which in turn affects banks. The monetary base, known as MO, or M0, and including the currency in circulation and commercial banks' reserves held at the central bank, began to deteriorate in early March, an Oxford economics report states. This process accelerated as the war intensified, so that M0 had fallen by AED 74.6 billion, which is 20.3 billion US, or 8.2% on March 30th. That would equate to an unsustainable 152% on an annualized basis. A decline in M0 indicates, quote, households or companies are withdrawing cash from the banking system, from the system overall, said Azad Zangana, head of the GCC macroeconomics at Oxford Economics in Dubai. Quote, that tends to happen at certain points in the year during Eid or festivals, but it's normally small, whereas there was a very large buildup of withdrawals over a 30-day period that became quite concerning. UAE central bank data on commercial banks' deposit levels is available up to February. Total deposits reached a record AED 2.94 trillion that month, of which 2.1 trillion was in dirhams and 847 billion in foreign currencies. The March data will be published in mid-May. So basically they're saying that says about 1.7 trillion of these dollars was held in accounts that could be withdrawn immediately, and 1.24 trillion in interest-bearing time deposits that can be accessed only after an agreed period without incurring financial penalties. Quote, it's likely that withdrawals by people leaving the country have contributed to M0 declining, said Zangana. It could also be a sign that people are losing jobs or they're not earning enough, so are drawing down on their savings. Foreigners are on average represent 13% of the populations of high-income countries, whereas the figure for the UAE is about 74%, according to Oxford Economics. That makes the UAE more vulnerable to money outflows, said Zangana. So I want to read that again. On average, high-income countries, 13% of the population are foreigners, okay? But in the UAE, 74% of the population are foreigners. It says in 1990 through 1991, deposits in the UAE banks declined by 15% following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, according to Gayes Gokint, chief economist at Bahrain's Arab Banking Corporation. The Iran war is unlikely to have sparked outflows of a similar magnitude, he said. I want to read that again. So in 91, when the Gulf War happened, the UAE banks declined by 15% following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. But again, that was before like Dubai was built. That was before Abu Dhabi was built, because those were all built like 20 years ago. Those didn't exist in 1991. It was just a desert, right? And it says the Iran war is unlikely to have sparked outflows of a similar magnitude. Nevertheless, sizable deposit outflows could cause financial conditions to tighten, and there could be fiscal costs, said Gokint. Whatever happens, the large external assets of the UAE could shield the economy from volatility caused by outflows. Interbank lending costs. The Oxford Economics report also pointed to a clear sign that ongoing withdrawals of capital were exerting stress on the banking system. The spread on the UAE's 3-month interbank lending rate versus the U.S. overnight swap index more than doubled in March. EBOR determines UAE borrowing, so a rising spread indicates tightening domestic liquidity and a higher relative funding cost in the banking system. In response, the central bank launched what it described as a comprehensive package to reinforce the stability and resilience of the UAE banking sector in mid-March. They injected a bunch of money into their banking system to keep the banks liquid, because so many people were there were bank runs happening. So they're describing a bank run on UAE banks, and the most likely explanation is that people are leaving the country, and they want to take their money with them. But as this thing points out, it's unlikely that the Iran war is causing all this. So then what is it? Well, could it be related to the 10 Mexican politicians who were just indicted by the DOJ as related to the cartels? Could it be related to Gustavo Petro coming to the White House in February and telling President Trump, hey, if you really want to go after the cartels in Central America, you got to go after the banks in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi? He said that. He said you got to go after the banks in the UAE. And now we have the banking sector in the UAE, official reports that are saying a liquidity crisis in banks in the UAE. And we also have reports of the UAE getting crushed by Iranian attacks. It says Zangana said a prolonged period of elevated EBOR spreads a posed problem for the banks. Quote, that's why it's so important for the UAE central bank to inject liquidity, he said. It probably won't be the only time this year that it does so. And then there's another story here. This is from 2 weeks ago. But Trump says the U.S. is mulling a UAE currency swap. And for those who don't remember, what's going on here? For those who don't remember, Scott Bessent, like currency swaps, like that's his thing. Remember, he did currency swaps for George Soros, brought the British pound, like crashed the British pound 30, I think it was like 30 years ago, right? That was like the big deal that Soros did to get rich. And so now Trump is talking about a currency swap with the UAE. The U.S. is considering providing a currency swap to the UAE as part of its Gulf ally. As part of support for its Gulf ally, President Trump said in a television interview, the UAE Central Bank informally asked for the swap arrangement, which would enable it to exchange dirhams for dollars should the Iran war cause longer-term economic challenges. The central bank did not respond to AGBI requests for comments, but when asked in an interview with U.S. television network CNBC whether a currency swap line to the UAE was under consideration, Trump replied, "It is. It's been a good country, a good ally of ours," Trump said. "I'm surprised because they are really rich. A year ago when I went there and I got them to invest $1 trillion in the United States, they are very good for this country. So if I can help them, I would." A currency swap line is an agreement between two central banks to exchange currencies. Were the UAE to secure such a facility with the U.S., the UAE central bank could exchange dirhams for dollars with the Federal Reserve and supply these to the domestic financial system to mitigate potential dollar shortages. The two parties would swap back to the funds at a pre-agreed date, with the UAE also paying interest. Any suggestion that the UAE requires external financial backing misreads the facts. Youssef Al-Taiba, we know all about him, the UAE's ambassador to the U.S., said in a statement on social media. The UAE and the United States will continue to prosper together for decades to come, not because one depends on the other for support, but because both benefit from one of the world's most important economic partnerships. Establishing a swap line would not necessarily indicate the UAE is running out of dollars, but is more of a precautionary measure. The Fed maintains permanent swap lines with the central banks of the Eurozone, the UK, Japan, Canada, and Switzerland. And just so we're clear, here's the statement from Youssef Al-Otaiba. Youssef Al-Otaiba is the guy who put Jared Kushner in touch with MBS back in 2016. He is the ambassador from the UAE to the US. It was Tom Barrack who went to him and said, "Hey, we need to get the Saudi prince. We need to get this Saudi prince in touch with Trump." And Youssef Al-Otaiba was the one who facilitated the whole thing. So anyway, here is the statement. It says, Ambassador Al-Otaiba, we very much appreciate President Trump's recognition of the UAE as one of America's most important economic and trade partners. That recognition reflects the depth of a relationship built on mutual interest, mutual investment, and long-term strategic confidence. Any suggestion that the UAE requires external financial backing misreads the facts. The UAE is one of the world's most financially resilient economies, underpinned by more than $2 trillion in sovereign investment assets, more than $300 billion in foreign currency reserves held by the UAE central bank, and a banking sector with approximately $1.5 trillion in deposits. That strength is precisely why the UAE has already invested more than $1 trillion in the U.S. economy, with a clear pathway for that figure to grow significantly. The UAE and United States will continue to prosper together for decades to come, not because one depends on the other for support, but because both benefit from one of the most important economic partnerships. Yeah, so that is interesting because, 1.5 trillion in deposits, but apparently that number has dropped by hundreds of billions of dollars in the past month. And this statement was put out 2 weeks ago. So anyway, all of that's really interesting. I mean, we're up against the clock here. I got to sign off here a few minutes early. I got to take my kids to go play tennis. But let's look at just a few things about Israel. We'll get deeper into Israel on Friday. So right now, what's happening there is all of these different groups are turning on Netanyahu. You have the ex-Shin Bet chief Yoram Cohen talking about this guy Eisenkot. So Eisenkot is another one of these politicians. You got Naftali Bennett. We've talked about him. You've got Yair Lapid. Him and Bennett together form a new political party. There's been talk that this guy Eisenkot, who is the guy on the right here in this picture, that he might join that coalition. So he would bring a third political party into that coalition with Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid. And so Eisenkot's latest recruit is the ex-Shin Bet chief. The Shin Bet's like the FBI for Israel, Yoram Cohen. And Yoram Cohen says leaving Netanyahu in power is dangerous. Okay, so we also have Smotrik's been running his mouth a lot lately. Smotrik says that including the Arab Party in the government was 1,000 times worse than the October 7th failure. Now he's levying these attacks against Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett because back in 2021, when those two ran together and ousted Netanyahu from power, and they became co-prime ministers for 18 months until Netanyahu went and recruited Smotrik and Itamar Ben-Gvir and these other radicals to form a new coalition with him. Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid allowed these Arab parties, because there are Arabs in Israel, right? And they do have political parties. They're very small, but they still do hold seats in the Knesset. And they're called, what are they called? Islam Rayam. I think that's how you say it. Islamist Rayam. Says Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich sparked an uproar on Tuesday when he asserted that former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's decision to include the Islamist Rayam Party in his 2021-2022 government was far worse than the government failures tied to Hamas's October 7th, 2023 onslaught, the worst attack on civilians in Israeli history, which saw some 1,200 people murdered and 251 taken hostage, and which led to a multi-front war on which some 900 others have been killed. I think the number's probably higher than that. But yeah, it says Smotrich's comments drew immediate condemnation from the opposition, with Rayam chairman Mansour Abbas, who's the guy here on the right, asserting that human life holds no value in his eyes, talking about Bennett, and Bennett accusing the finance minister as well as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of trying with all their might to make people forget the atrocities that occurred on their watch. During an interview with Radio 103 FM, Smotrich spoke of his disdain for Bennett, accusing him of turning his back on his voters following the 2021 elections and breaking multiple election promises to form his government. And just goes into the details of these statements. And then let's see. I'm going to play this last clip of Smotrich, and then we will get out of here. Okay, so this is going to be in Hebrew, but I'll just read what it says. Okay, so it says, thank you very much for coming. He says, I said, how are you? Very good. Thank you very much for coming. So let's start with what's important. This is a radio interview. I think it's the same one that they're referring to in that article. Says, let's start with maybe what's most important. Your son was injured in Lebanon. Smotrich's son. He's in the IDF. And he says, yes, Baruch Basong's now in rehabilitation. Dasar is improving at a very fast pace. That's the son. We hope that within 2 weeks, in order of magnitude, he will be released. He will be transferred to the hospital one day later. It will take a few months, but he's supposed to be, according to everything, put in the hands of God. And with his help, he will return to us. He keeps asking me, this is Smotrich saying this, he keeps asking me not to finish the work and leave him more to do in our hearts with this. And I tell him, don't worry. There will be enough for everyone. He will come back with the help of God to fight there as a complete victory in Lebanon. And so what he's saying is, he says, don't destroy everything in Lebanon. Let me come back and finish and help you finish destroying Lebanon. This is his son, the soldier. And so this has gone viral across X, and just kind of speaks to the malice that's in Smotrich's heart and the malice that's in his ideology. Yeah, so that's kind of where we are with that. Yeah, it's freezing is getting out of hand. Okay. And I think that's probably all we got time for today, because I do got to get out of here. All right. So let's see. Do we have any chat? Any rants? Any boosts? Got one rant, a few rants. HL421 $2. They were trained and handled out of the SEAL base a little south of North Island. I think that program shut down around 2013, 2014. Didn't see them after that. I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you're referring to, and then you post that again. They were trained and handled out of the SEAL base a little south of North Island. I think that program shut down around 2013, 2014. Lee Walden, $5. Ghost, keep building that mind map, growing one day. Gladio will use as reference. Stay the course, pal. Appreciate you, Lee. Good to see you. Lee Walden again. If I were to post, if I were the most powerful man on the earth with all that comes with that and want peace for all, how would I eliminate that chokehold of Hormuz? Just a thought. Yeah. And then Keith O'Higgins, $2. Rumors are that Steve Bannon is already getting funded for the new Sharjah wall. Yeah, well, appreciate that, Keith. Good to see you. If you are listening to this on replay, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv/boost or just click on the boost section in the top upper right. And I think we might be caught up, but I just figured I'd check it out. All right, guys, hit the thumbs up, share the show, and we will see y'all on Friday. Y'all have a great day. See y'all Friday.
Christmas clean love, young virgin from heaven, visiting to the man above her. She just ain't nothing. She doesn't like the view. She doesn't like the view. Doesn't like the view. But he sings himself deep. Oh, and down the bottom into the
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.